Welcome, everybody, to the Strive Summit podcast. I'm your host, Alex Hanna, and with me I have Kevin Deegan from BIM Ceart. Kevin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey Alex, hey everybody. My name is Kevin Deegan. I'm the BIM manager and founder of a BIM management consultancy based out of Toronto called BIM Ceart. And yeah, I met up with Alex a few weeks ago, and through a colleague of mine as well, Trevor, who was on the podcast a few weeks ago as well. And we just connected, and we decided that we were going to do this podcast and do this talk about all things BIM. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Kevin, where are you originally from?
Originally from Ireland, in a small town called Newbridge. It's about 30 to 40 minutes outside Dublin.
Okay,
So
all
yeah,
right.
yeah,
And now I have a geography question for you.
go for it.
How far is the drive from one end to the other? Because in the U.S.,
E-
one state's like 9 hours.
right, yeah, of course. So east to west, that's a good question actually, because my girlfriend is from the west of Ireland in a place called Mayo. So if we were to drive from my house to hers, it would take roughly 4 hours.
Oh,
But
wow.
that's at the yeah, that's on the real kind of back end of the west. But if you were to drive from like Dublin to Galway, which is on the west as well, that's kind of by a main highway, which would take you about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So it just depends on where you're going, because we've a lot of like kind of rural roads, and
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of driving down a long time around these. And then north to south, yeah. Like I don't know, I've never really done it from the kind of top point to the more southern point, but I could imagine probably 6 or 7 hours straight off, straight off. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was just a personal question for me. I was trying to get a size kind of thing going in. I like to learn about geography of people where they're at,
The
and kind of
comparison I kind of give it is to Nova Scotia, and
okay.
it's about a similar size, yeah. And funnily enough, I was just talking recently with a colleague of mine from Korea, and we were getting into that whole geography and size of the countries, and we ended up we were doing something in work, and we ended up kind of googling on the side to see how many kind of islands you would fit in Ontario, and it worked out as about like 12 or 13 or something like that. And he was saying, oh yeah, that's similar to South Korea as well. So there's another comparison. It's pretty similar in size
Wow.
to South Korea. Yeah, you wouldn't imagine that as well. But yeah, so Canada and America are big land masses.
I'll stay in my region. I'm North Pacific Northwest. I'm good. I'm here. I'm happy here.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, is going back to BIM a little bit. Is there any like recent projects or kind of like technology you've been using or seeing that you're excited about coming forward into BIM?
Yeah, like there's always technology in it. It kind of brings me back to my whole kind of personal philosophy when it comes to BIM, is that I feel that technology is kind of moving very quick, and it's difficult for the industry to kind of keep up with it. And you're always hearing about new technologies, kind of enhancing workflows and leveraging this, that, and the other. And for me, the technology is basically what the fundamentals of what BIM are, and that kind of gets me more excited as opposed to seeing new pieces of software, new pieces of technology to come out, because we need to kind of, as an industry, to kind of focus on the basics. And that's kind of what my whole philosophy with my company is kind of the punchline is bring BIM back to basics. So although there is a lot of kind of software out there, and personally I've just started kind of going on the path of kind of Python coding and things like that to be able to enhance what we already have. So for of course Revit. So just to kind of make more add-ins for that, to kind of smooth transitions along to improve workflows and things like that. So for me, on a personal level, that's more exciting than kind of seeing what AI does. And obviously AI has kind of helped that, because I use ChatGPT a lot to help with the coding. And yeah, it's like people really need to realize how they can use this kind of current software and free software to be able to help them progress in their knowledge and their technology, basically. So
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that you mentioned that people can't keep up with the technology. I think what's happening is there's so many people innovating right now that there's so many new ways of thinking and doing things that it's now up to these companies to find out which one they want to adapt, right?
yeah,
And like the your philosophy back to basics makes perfect sense because a lot of this technology is enhancing the workflow of what BIM is. So I think of scanning, for instance, right? We used to do it like as built or you go out there and measure and stuff, and that'd be like you'd measure, and that'd be your only reference to real world measurements, right? And you'd build off that. Think of remodels and stuff. Scanning came in, and now it's an enhancement. Now, can it get done without scanning? Yes, but does anyone want to do that? No, I'd rather go out there with the scanner and get the data and then always have it. And that's obviously major benefits, and that's the most simplest way I can think about it when scanning. But we're talking like AI tools, fabrication tools, even like the on-site, VR, AR effects on a project that you're looking through. That tech is amazing, and I think the people that are going to adapt it sooner are going to be the people that get ahead and understand and are more willing to adapt again to newer tech. It's just hard to take that big leap of faith into something that you don't know if it's going to work or not, and it's all very
It
new. It's all very new in like the
it
past
is.
couple of
It's
years.
like it's scary for a lot of the industry as well, and especially when you're in firms like AEC firms, and you have like impediments due to kind of time constraints to be able to kind of deliver these projects and to kind of submit construction document sets, and what you see a lot is when a project kind of kicks off, and we can kind of elaborate on this further as we get into to chat as well, where you get excited as a project at the start when all these like kind of wishful thinking kind of processes are promised, and then you see the potential to be able to use all this like scan to BIM software and so on. But then as it commences, like kind of the senior project teams realize the cost implications with this, the time implications with this, and usually it gets pushed aside, which is unfortunate. And then you kind of resort back to like basic, what I always say, lines on a sheet approach, and it's kind of, and then sometimes like a project could get shelved as well. So you might not see it again for like a few months, and then all of a sudden when it comes back on the scene, you're in this big rush to get it out, and then you're forgetting about all the technology. And that's kind of what it brings me back to about that technology question. It's There's so much of it out there, and it's kind of unfortunate that it's not used as much. Like, don't get me wrong, there's definitely the high end firms in the world that are multinational, that have like thousands of people that can have the resources, they get the big projects, and they're utilizing it a lot. But it's part of my, and we'll get into it again more, part of what my company is trying to kind of feed toward is helping the industry grow more, and helping those SME companies to grow more, and to get involved with the basic process of BIM, and to be able to utilize the technology that they already have. And then eventually when that point comes along, when we understand what we're doing it, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it, we can start introducing more of this technology. So you get to learn Revit inside out basically, and then you realize, okay, scan to BIM, for example, the next project, we know how to use Revit. The team is very confident in using it. Then we're doing this existing building. So we scan to BIM, and then we have the confidence of being able to bring that into Revit, and to be able to replicate that inside Revit and understand the processes involved with it, instead of just kind of throwing everything, like all the technology there at once, and saying, okay, I want to use this, I want to use that. And you're just like, oh, we don't know how to integrate it all together. So that's kind of a bit of a struggle you see a lot.
I'm interested. You jogged my memory a little bit. I'm interested to find out, and I guess people listening let me know. Um, when project starts and everyone's excited, right? You mentioned something about that, and then all this potential for tech. I wonder if the timeline is originally based on implementing the tech or using the tech to speed up the timeline, and then we realize we can't implement technology, and the timeline doesn't change, so we're back to basics, which takes longer. And like this is just in general project BIM project processing, right? Deadlines, right? Deadlines are always
Yeah.
moving. The timeline for products always change based on difficulty and information you have and stuff like that. So I'm curious if this has happened to people where like, oh yeah, we're gonna use BIM and it's gonna speed up our timeline this much. But is it the people that understand BIM that's gonna speed up the timeline, or is it the guy with the money saying you're gonna use BIM and speed up my timeline, not realizing what it is? Or is it like the guy who's like, we're gonna use this tech, it's gonna save us so much time, we build the timeline upon that? It's
Well, that's
just a
part of
thought.
the kind of the industry wide kind of issues with it, and it's the misconceptions about what BIM is. And I've listened to several of your podcasts, and I think the common theme is that everyone kind of mentions the same. And not only your podcast, but the conversations I've had with many BIM managers throughout the years, and kind of community meetups and things like that. It always is that kind of frustration where you think that Revit, and the senior staff in firms that kind of are not involved in the day-to-day project running, would think that just by using Revit we're doing BIM, and then obviously I even heard this 10 years ago, when you're doing BIM, you're saving so much time and money and all that, but it's far from a reality, because it's a very technical piece of software, Revit is, and once you have to understand so much in terms of 3D construction as well, and then understand that every view talks to each other and they connect with each other, and if you change something in one view, it's going to change in another view, and that's where the time issue is when they realize that and they print their sheets out and they have a peer review, and then they realize, okay, this is not referencing the right view, or why is this wall jutting up here in a section view, and it looks okay on the plan, but then people don't understand that, and then kind of frustration becomes along with the project, and you're trying to kind of get things out, and you're struggling, and then you end up taking all these kind of workarounds, and you just kind of hide things in view, and you start drawing lines, and then you lose the run of yourself. Like, you don't have time to kind of fix it, and that's where it kind of falls apart in that sense. And there is that kind of, like I said, the misconception, thinking that, okay, like, we're going to use Revit here, it's going to improve so much, but it's far from the truth, unfortunately. And it's just something that I try to kind of push out there towards, what I try to communicate to all my teams and everyone within the industry, and it is a common understanding.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify for everyone, BIM is a process, Revit
Yeah,
is a tool, AutoCAD is a tool, right? The process of BIM is not faster. Using
yeah,
programs like CAD and Revit make drafting faster, but the information part, that information part that's in the middle of BIM, is the key part that is probably the most, how do I put this? Is the most important data of the drawing to make sure your drawings come out correct. And that may be the wrong wording, but what I'm saying is those little shared parameters and things you have to make inside, we'll say for Revit, for instance, right? Or if you use SketchUp or whatever, those parameters and those items you pull out for schedules and stuff, those are the key components that take a while to understand. Like you said, basic understanding of programs, like why are things looking like this way? They look great on floor plan, but in 3D they look like crap. No, I totally get
yeah.
that. Interesting.
And
All
that
right.
and that and that is, like, that affects what you're trying to get out of the model as well. So, like, it's one of the first things I was ever kind of taught in BIM was, like, you can only get value out of the value you put into it. So BIM is heavily involved. So, like, BIM, like you said, is a process, and it kind of stands for building information modeling. But I prefer the term building information management, because you're managing information more so than modeling, right? So, because everybody can model, and everybody can open up Revit and draw walls and put in doors and so on, but how to manage that information inside that, by, like you said, putting in parameters, extracting that information in schedules, transforming that or exporting that into other softwares as well to be able to get value out of it, like Navisworks, for example, quantifying and construction sequencing and so on and so forth. So that's where the kind of misconception lies. Nobody kind of portrays that image of what BIM is when you're at, like, kind of conferences and meetups, and when kind of vendors are talking to kind of senior partners and senior principals about software that they should get, that they're not, I don't feel that the wording is put right in terms of what to expect when you're trying to get value out of what you're putting into it. And look, we all know it's a big investment, it's a huge investment for all the software. So what I always say is, we already pay for these, like, AEC licenses, so you try to use them to the best of your ability. And there's a lot of software within that package that we don't even use. Like, it's like Forma, for example. The newest one. That's probably one of the most recent pieces of technologies I got involved with, and that's very exciting. And when I done recent kind of presentations and meetings on that as well, people are amazed with it. And I think I delved into kind of Autodesk Format. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, that was
A
out
little
several
bit,
years
yeah.
ago, and so they're kind of discontinuing that now as well. But I was heavily involved in that, trying to kind of improve the schematic design with BIM processes, and trying to get um, kind of the right project people involved in using that at that early stage, like the project managers who are doing the design, and they're mixing between that and CAD. But they always end up just using CAD and SketchUp, and then you get into kind of design development, and then that's where the Revit modeling starts. But you're trying to convert CAD into that, and you're trying to convert SketchUp, which doesn't really kind of communicate well with Revit. So I start going into Format, and yeah, it was a bit of a struggle to kind of get to it. Kind of used the same kind of modeling concept as SketchUp, But then that's completely blown out of the water now with Format. And it's so much easier to be able to kind of model shapes, create floor plans, um, even things like bringing in surrounding buildings. That was just a kind of a game changer for everybody. I've showed it recently because it just generates the massing of surrounding buildings in the schematic design, and it generates the roads because you're bringing in a map from a certain location. So that speeds up the process so much, and you can do your shapes and you can do your different floor plans within that as well. And once you bring that into Revit, it automatically generates all the levels. It automatically generates a default wall when you bring it in as well. If you have demising walls, it's going to generate a wall. So you straight away you have BIM information in that model, which will save you so much time. But you might not, you obviously might have to change out the walls to your standards and things like that,
Right.
but at least you have them there, you know.
That's interesting. Yeah. We'll have to talk after this, and you can kind of show me it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like I said, like I said, that's free. That's part of your AEC license. So the majority of the industry has AEC now. They're paying
Mm-hmm.
their yearly or their 3 yearly. So and they're not familiar that they have this free for it as well. So like we need to utilize what we already have and what we already pay for. So that's kind of the essence of it.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. All right. So, Kevin, we're here to hear about your BIM journey, on where you
Wow.
started.
How long have we got?
We've got 45 minutes.
Okay.
um,
Okay, I can start with chapter one anyway.
I wanna hear about how you first got interested in it. What really kind of sparked your interest, or even like what path did you take to guide you to find that interest, and then how'd you get from Ireland to Canada, and how'd you get to doing BIM Ceart? I want to hear the full story. So why don't you start at the beginning and kind of go from
Okay,
there?
let's go for it. Where do I start? So yeah, I recently just watched one of your podcasts with Abarna, and you mentioned that you didn't really get into kind of your career till you were 28, and I
Yeah.
found that very interesting. Yeah, because I'm on a similar role. So uh, back in like when I finished kind of high school, leaving cert we call it in Ireland, 17, 18, I went into construction and I worked there for like as grounds working and kind of landscape and things like that for the next 8 or 10 years, and in between that, a lot of traveling, a lot of kind of just living life. But the global recession in 2008, 2009 kind of made me look at things a little bit differently. And in kind of high school, the comparison, I was always kind of involved with kind of architectural drawing and the practical side of things. I always had an interest in it, and I did from a kind of a young age. So in when the recession hit, I decided, okay, this is a good chance now because like the construction industry is kind of going under. Things are a lot cheaper as well. They're trying to entice people back into education. So I started a course in Dublin, just a kind of a 1 year certificate course on architecture, architectural drawing or technology, I think it was called. And I never really decided to commit to anything long term at that point. I just wanted to take 1 year each year as it comes. So in my first year of that, I remember we were using AutoCAD architecture. I don't know if you remember that. Right. So that was the first
Yeah.
kind of taste of 3D, building blocks in 3D, putting doors and things like that. And I just like kind of fell in love with it. And I was like, okay, this is something I want to kind of pursue more. So then an opportunity for the following 2 years opened up for a diploma in architectural technology elsewhere in another college in Dublin. So I decided, yeah, okay, look, I'm going to go once I'm in the door. I'm going to keep going anyway. And I done the next couple of years, and we kind of got known to a bit of Revit, but we weren't really using it, and we didn't really understand it as much. But again, it was exciting to be able to go from that 3D AutoCAD architecture into Revit. So then a big opportunity came along where the college we were associated with in Dublin had a kind of a collaboration with a university in Cardiff in Wales in the UK, whereby we could go there for 1 year and we could finish our degree in architectural technology. So that was like, okay, like I'm 3 years in, so I might as well go for this. And it was a great opportunity to have my undergraduate degree. And once I went there, I realized Revit was more involved in the curriculum, because the UK had like a mandate in place at that stage for BIM, and they had 3 levels of BIM. So BIM level one, level two, and level three. And level one is just like your CAD formats and things like that. So level two was kind of called collaboration, and by 2016, all public sector projects had to be completed using BIM level 2. So it kind of pushed the industry and it pushed the education system to be able to kind of start teaching Revit and teaching the BIM processes. And the UK were like light years ahead in terms of their standard creation that they had, kind of BIM execution plan templates. And they had a standard called the UK PAS 1192, which is publicly available specification. And that was the standard approach for BIM level 2 to be able to deliver a BIM project, basically. And it was like, it has developed into ISO 19650 now. Okay, so that's where ISO 19650 came from. It came from the UK BIM standards system. So it was kind of tried and tested, and it was developed into the international standard. And yeah, so the rest is history. But so when I completed my undergraduate, it forced me to kind of use Revit a lot more for my kind of end of year projects. And for me, it was just like, wow, this is amazing. It's like playing a game, like inside Revit. And
Yep.
I remember, I think recently I looked at my first render I've ever done in Revit, and I thought, like at the time, this is amazing. But I'm looking at it now, and I'm just like, wow, that's just terrible. You know what I mean? But yeah, it was exciting, and that was like 2013. So
Wow.
before I knew it, I had a 4 year degree done when I only kind of committed to doing 1 year and maybe a second year and just going to get a job in Dublin and work as like a CAD technician at the time, you know.
Hmm.
So when I moved back to Dublin then after that, I ended up moving up to Dublin from my town and I got a job as an architectural technologist in a small firm in Dublin. And just working as a technologist, and they were heavily involved in using CAD, and they liked that I had this Revit experience, and I was trying to do things like create 3D models from schools that we were designing and things like that. But everything was kind of submitted, and day-to-day workings were CAD. But I was just trying to do it for the selling effect, and so I was kind of using that on the side. But then, funnily enough, an opportunity came about in a university in Dublin, Dublin Institute of Technology. It's now actually called Technical University of Dublin, so it got university status in the last few years. I can't remember exactly when, but they had created the very first postgraduate BIM certificate, BIM management certificate. It was called BIM Technologies or something. So it was a 1 year course, and I said, okay, this is perfect, and it was part time, so it allowed me to be able to study part time
Hmm.
work as well.
Yep.
And within like the first 6 months of that, I think they were pushing and trying to get a master's degree program set up. So funnily enough, it just happened within the first 6 or 12 months I was in that course. So that first year of that developed into a second year called BIM Collaboration, and then the third year was a 6 month capstone experience for your master's degree. So it all came in, everything about my whole BIM journey was just year on year, you know, year on year. And yeah, we were the very first kind of um, class to kind of graduate as a postgraduate master's in BIM management in Ireland. And there were a couple of kind of universities in the UK offering kind of distant learning programs where you could just study from home and things like that. There was only like half a dozen or so, but this was the first one in Ireland. And the whole program over the 2.5 years, obviously part time and working as well, it was heavily based on that UK PAS 1192 system. Okay, so it kind of followed that to a degree. So it walked you through how to do a BIM project from inception to completion and everything in between, and to work with other people in other kind of disciplines like construction management and mechanical and all that. And within the course of that, it made you like Revit was on the curriculum, so we had literally a class for Revit architecture, and we were taught how to use Revit architecture for months on end, right? So that kind of gave you the stepping stone
That's awesome.
to really get into the
Hmm.
software. And I know that's a big problem in the industry where I think you spoke with Jacob as well. He mentioned I think the same thing about you're just kind of left to your own devices when you're in your architectural degrees, and you just decide on the software you're going to use, and then you self-learn and so on and so forth. So with the master's degree that we had, because it was heavily involved with the practical side of things, and we had some great teachers and mentors, and like Dr. Maliki Matthews was a great kind of mentor for me as well during that, and kind of we worked together, and they taught you how to use Revit from a management level, okay, as opposed
Hmm.
to a model level, okay. So it allowed you to understand the how, the why, and the what, right? And why we're modeling the way we're modeling, what we're going to get out of it, what we have to put into it to get out of it, right? So that was a complete change of learning Revit as opposed to just like modeling a wall, dropping a door in there. Understanding 3D construction as part of it as well. So yeah, so and we got to work with other like there was people from all the industry, all different ages, from like 20 years of age up to 50 and 60, with like 40 years construction experience and things like that. Were all involved in this course, and it was, you were learning from everybody, and you worked in groups to mimic real life uh, projects where you had a mechanical and electrical, you had a structural guy, you had an architect guy, which was myself, and then you had a construction manager,
Hmm.
and we worked together to create projects. So I would worry about the architectural modeling, and the construction manager then kind of coordinate with us to try and get it into Navisworks and all this kind of stuff as well. So, like I said, it was heavily involved in that whole BIM process. That was the key to that part of education. It wasn't just about BIM technology; it was about the process and how we get from A to B. So yeah, and then that's that kind of finalized, and we can get into more if you have more questions. But yeah, so as soon as that was kind of completed, my girlfriend and I decided that we were going to emigrate here. And it was kind of on the cards as well. We were just coming up to the age of being able to get that 2 year working visa. So it was just like under, like it was 34, 30, 33, 34. And you could get the working visa up until you were 35. So kind of gave us that stepping stone. And like I would have got it if it was over due to my education and all that as well. But at least it was kind of an easier process to get over here and then kind of get a job, build up your kind of experience, and eventually becoming like a permanent residency here and citizenship probably sometime in the future, of course. But so when I got here, I ended up like just kind of applying for jobs. It was cold calling. I didn't really look at places that were advertising BIM managers. I just kind of sent my resume into firms, and I got so many callbacks because they were all just amazed by what the hell is a master's in BIM management,
Hmm.
and it's like it's unheard of. So that was kind of that selling point. And yeah, I had many interviews, and I kind of felt in a position where I was interviewing them as well, because there was so many different firms after the kind of skill set, which was kind of overwhelming as well. So yeah, and then I worked for several years in one firm, and then I moved on to another firm at the end of COVID, and yeah, and was just heavily involved in kind of creating standards, like everybody is creating the standards, kind of implementing strategies, creating templates and things like that, and kind of working with the team. So I always kind of enjoyed working directly with the teams to overcome obstacles and things like that. And that's kind of what formed me, what forms my kind of consultancy company as well, to be able to work directly with teams to help people learn and grow instead of just taking the wheel yourself and driving someone there. So you're working with
Hmm.
them, you're getting down into the trenches with them essentially. And yeah, you're not in the kind of top office just kind of coordinating from there. And then just over a year ago, then I decided I was always going to kind of set up some sort of a consultancy at some point in my life, because I always was an advocate of remote working. And I believe that with technology, like we can kind of work from anywhere. And there is that kind of age old mentality, I suppose, about kind of office environment. And for me, it just like didn't make sense. And I kind of had a lot of I wouldn't say freedoms, but like I got a lot of things that I kind of requested, because they kind of knew that I knew what I was talking about. I knew I had structure in place. Like every firm I went to always mentioned something about, okay, yeah, we had BIM managers in the past, but we didn't have anybody kind of like you. And I'm not blowing my own trumpet here or anything like that. I'm modest, but it's where it kind of came from. Like it's because of that heavily ingrained BIM process, and about kind of instilling that on your workforce as well. So and then here we are. Yeah, just a year into my consultancy, and things are going great.
Awesome. I have a few questions for you. So you mentioned you were looking at your first render and how amazing you thought it was back then, and then how
Yeah.
you took your 1 year course. What do you have a moment? Like, is there a time where you remember where like you saw Revit or used Revit for the first time, or like there was a pivotal moment where you were like, yeah, no, I'm gonna keep following down this path because this is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was kind of in that. second year after the AutoCAD architecture,
Mm-hmm.
when I got introduced to Revit and I was using it, and it was kind of scary but exciting as well, because it's like this software is so technical and it's so detailed, and it's like, wow, how does anybody ever get to know all this? And
Mm-hmm.
but for me, with an all kind of with my kind of personality, is about getting to a level where I I wouldn't say know more than other people, because I'm always like nobody knows it all, but to get to a level of introducing something new that people are not familiar with already, because you kind of get excitement out of kind of teaching people or showing people new tricks, and kind of getting good at what you want to pursue in the future, so you just kind of stick with it. And before I knew it, I was just I just it kind of came to me, I committed a lot of time to it. I studied it. I watched a lot of online courses. I followed along with things like Linda back in the day as well,
Mm-hmm.
lynda.com and all that as well. So just to kind of, and I knew the area of where I needed to focus my attention on, as opposed to like basic modeling. I knew I had to understand the complexities of the software to understand how to get value out of it. So that, and being able to kind of troubleshoot, that kind of brought me into my kind of bread and butter market now, of being able to troubleshoot issues very quickly, like, to understand, okay, why is this not visible in a certain view, and how quick can I fix this? And like when you do that, people, when you help people out, they're amazed. They're like, wow, I didn't know that. And I never kind of fix something on my own. When somebody has an issue, I always kind of, okay, I study the issue and I find out what the problem is, but then I show them how I done it, so they can learn
Yeah.
as well. Okay, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's key. It's not like you don't want to take all the credit, and plus I learn from other people as well. So like, it's not like nobody knows it all, especially, and it's something I always kind of post on LinkedIn as well. It's like we're all learning from each other. Nobody knows it all, and no matter what level or how much experience you have, Revit is smarter than everybody, and it can do so much more than everybody else.
So
So
what I tell people about Revit is Revit thinks it's smarter than you, so it doesn't like to do certain things. So there's a lot of times where you
exactly.
gotta. So little tip out there, because I actually just ran through this issue. If your menus are going away in Revit, or like the edit group and assembly little checkbox are going away, move it to your laptop screen or your main screen, or change your resolution back and forth. And you know what?
Yeah,
It's one of those things that's like you don't know until you do it. I think even on like
yeah,
forums and stuff, it was like change the resolution, move it to the screen. But yeah, I had to deal with
yeah.
that
The
one,
uh,
and I
the,
could.
the the little group window.
Oh my god!
That's That's
You
the
need to
nightmare.
take
Yeah,
it. You need to put it up in your ribbon. You need to keep it there. Don't touch it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
It's it's
okay, so
it's
you
it's
understand.
insane the amount of things that can happen. Yeah, it's insane.
So it was interesting for you to tell me about the education. What year Revit were you using at that time when you first got into it?
Oh, I remember. I think I remember the first one, R14. Like really, it
Okay.
wasn't a year. It was R14. I think was the very first one I used. And
So
like, don't quote me on that. I could have been using one before that, but that's just the one that springs to memory.
mhm.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how far ahead they were at creating those courses and stuff. Because, like you said, we have right now. Uh, I think we have a skills gap issue. I think there's a getting people in the right jobs at the right time issue, and part of that is everyone we're kind of slow to adapting BIM here, but there are some states that have like mandated it on certain projects. Everyone's kind of getting in the realm of Revit's now the standard, not AutoCAD, but also Revit's not for everyone. There's Plant 3D. There's people that have AutoCAD to advanced steel workflows because that's what they do, and it's perfectly fine. So if you're out there thinking if you have to have Revit, look at your workflow and see if you need to. Um, that's probably one of the biggest things I can say is like,
Yeah. No, no. Like, you hit the nail on the head there, definitely.
yeah.
Because when I first moved to Canada, I was applying for jobs, and one of them was very intrigued about my resume and so on. So, but they use ArchiCAD for 90% of their projects,
Hmm.
and I had no experience with ArchiCAD whatsoever. But I knew in my head that if that was the course I had to take, that I would just learn ArchiCAD, and I knew I would become good at it. It's
Right.
like, you know what I mean? You learn the basics in a few weeks to a couple of months, and then you can just elaborate on that when you get into the project environment and so on. So, yeah, even though we all talk about Revit because it is the market leader, and Autodesk are like the Skynet of the AEC sector, they control
Skynet.
everything, but Yeah, so but it's not just Revit, like you said. Yeah, there's so many pieces of software that can do the same things as well. So
Yeah, it's just finding that people and finding your workflow. Okay,
yeah,
BIM cart.
right.
Okay, you spell it CEART, but it's pronounced
Yeah,
cart. Can you explain that?
yeah. So obviously BIM and then cart is like an Irish word, which means kind of true, accurate, kind of real, and so it loosely translates to true BIM.
Oh,
And it's
okay.
pronounced cart, yeah. So it translates to true BIM in a sense, and that's the way I kind of wanted to kind of. And I always talk about that when I take on new clients, and people are always saying it, oh, BIM Ceart and all this kind of stuff. And I even had somebody say to me one time, I think I spelled my company name wrong. Is it not BIM Ceart? And I said, hey, why is there an A in there? And I said, no, trust me, it's correct, right? It's card. It's how the word is spelled in Irish. And yeah, so it just kind of it fell nicely, and I just thought uh, I'll get a bit of enjoyment out of just kind of confusing people,
Yeah,
about the word. But once people kind of understand the idea behind it, to say, okay, yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense. It's like true Vim. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
BIM cart. It's a little Irish.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
like it. I like it. Okay, so when was the moment where you were like, I need to do this on my own? Like there's moments like for reasons like Strive. I started Strive because I was hiring people and I'd go through like 30 resumes or 15 resumes, pick out the two I liked, interview them, turn out they were not what I wanted, and like I was very picky. And so I was like, man, if there's just a place I can go to and just pick who I want. And that's kind
Yeah.
of where that little acorn started, and then it grew into what it is now. But I want to know how did BIMCart start? What was the idea?
Um. Yeah. So like I said, I knew I wanted to kind of pursue this whole kind of consultancy business because I the personality with me as well. My character is about being in the kind of corporate world. It kind of wasn't for me. I loved working with teams. I loved developing new strategies, and always kind of very approachable. And communication was key to me as well. But
Mm-hmm.
it was the corporate world, and I just thought, okay, like you're subjected to like one area of understanding under one kind of corporate banner within one firm, and you conform to them set of standards, and regardless, you have to wait for them kind of particular projects to come in if you want to really kind of start delving into other technologies that the projects allow for. So the reason why I wanted to start this is to be able to kind of delve out into different areas and to help different kind of firms ranging in sizes, um, and just to kind of learn more and grow more and help the industry grow more as well at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day. So it was important to kind of have a couple of clients lined up when I started this as well. So I was in discussions for like a year or two before that with a colleague of mine, and he's an IT manager, and he has a lot of AEC firms as clients, and they were always getting questions about how to do something in Revit, even though they're just IT guys, right? And then even when it comes to updates and installing add-ins and all this kind of stuff, and these firms couldn't really answer the questions themselves. So they thought, okay, this the guy I know, Drew McGarry is his name, and he said to me, look, someone like you could actually help me and help my clients to kind of move forward in their whole BIM implementation. So they had, like I said, they had several BIM managers, BIM leads, BIM coordinators, whatever you want to call them in the past, and they just never had anything structured. And there was a revolving door of BIM experts coming through the ranks. And look, I was part of it, and the reason why I think, like as BIM leads, we want to be excited. We want to be kind of using technology as much as possible. We want to be
Mm-hmm.
implementing the process. And when you get involved in the projects where you come towards a lot of closed doors, and it kind of limits your ability to flourish, you just kind of want to expand on that, and you just hit roadblocks. So I wanted to get to a stage where I can assist these firms by always being there. So once a consultant has a foot in the door, you're always there. And regardless if they want to employ someone in house, yeah, of course, that's what I said to all my clients. And I can be a part of that transition. I can be a part of that assistance to help them understand what they need to look for, in terms of their BIM expert and things like that. Because usually when someone gets employed, they write on their resume, I can use Revit, and you don't really have an opportunity to test their skills. And I was heavily involved in that when we were employing people, testing their skills on Revit before we decided on employing them. And kind of sometimes I felt bad because, like people are kind of anxious and they're
Yeah.
overwhelmed in these assessments, and you only get like an hour or maybe 2 hours to kind of test them out. But, and you, like, I know myself and you know yourself, Alex, that um, you're not going to be able to assess someone's skill set in a software like that in a couple of hours. You literally need weeks, right?
Mm.
So it's insane. So I wanted to delve into that whole area of just kind of helping as many firms grow and the industry grow. And another prime example. So I had my bread and butter clients, and then the firms that I worked for here before um, I took on this venture as well took me back as a consultant, and they haven't replaced me since I left as well. So because they knew the value I was able to bring, and
Right,
they
right.
knew I had things set up to a certain level that a lot of the in-house staff can kind of take on and manage themselves as well. So I'm just there on the outside helping them to be able to push them to that next level, help them with troubleshooting and project setup and BIM project setup, and to be that guy to be able to have these BIM kickoff meetings and to be able to talk to kind of senior level staff to be about what BIM is and what the expectations are and all that. So it ranges from different levels, and then obviously was to help colleagues grow as well. So like I have several friends who are starting their own venture in architecture, and they recently got their stamps and things like that, and they're going out on their own trying to win projects. And obviously they know Revit, but they don't know the BIM process, and they obviously can't
Right.
afford to take on someone. So I can be
Hmm.
there to help them grow along on their journey as well. And like your smaller firms that have like three, four, and five people that they can't afford to take on a BIM manager. Okay, so they're kind of stuck in this like stuck in a rut basically, and they can't get out of it because they don't have the projects, they don't have the turnover to be able to hire someone, and they're kind of stuck using CAD and Revit and using it kind of in bad practices and things like that. So you can go in there and you can help them grow, and you can only commit like a couple of hours a week to these, and they're just like,
Right.
wow, this is fantastic. And like I said, even when they do grow and they decide, okay, they want someone in house, I can assist that transition. And but you can be that extra resource as well, because there's one thing that's kind of missing over here, which is another kind of misconception about having firms just needing kind of one BIM lead or one BIM manager and things like that. And back in the UK and Ireland, you have like several BIM managers within firms, okay, because all the
Oh wow.
projects are considered BIM, right? So it's like an architect coming into an office, right? They start as an intern, okay, and then they grow and then develop into they might do their exams after a few years. They work on different areas like contract
Right.
admin, contract
Hmm.
documents. Then they go and do their exams and they get their stamps, and then they might become a project manager, then an associate, senior associate, and so on. Okay, so and each project manager would manage like what, three, four projects, and there's probably 20 projects live in the office. So
Yep.
if you're talking about true BIM projects, there's no way one BIM manager can manage all those projects. It's just like it's impossible basically, right? So with all due respect to kind of the industry, that just tells me that there's like 80-90% of the industry that are just not doing BIM. They're using Revit, but they're just not doing BIM. Okay, they're doing using Revit to produce construction documents, because if you're involved in BIM, like like back home in the UK and Ireland, you have qualified BIM managers who one would delve into the information management aspect. Okay, so they'd manage the common data environment, which is BIM 360, SEC, setting up the BIM execution plan, and so on. Then you would have your BIM coordination manager who manages the clash detection and all that within Navisworks and all that. And they're all working as teams. And then you have your BIM coordinators, which are essentially your job captains on a team. So there's room for so many people, and then you have your hierarchy of like based on experience, and
Oh yeah. It's
so
it's been crazy the amount of like different, we'll call them titles, that are out there. And I think I posted something about that on Strive of like, um, what title, what do you tell your parents you do, or what, something like that. And it was a poll and something, and I was like, do you tell them you play video games for a living? Do you not care anymore? Like, how do you explain to your parents what you do? because it used to be
Very
just
difficult.
draft. Yeah, it used to be just drafter. I was a drafter,
Yeah,
and then it became, well, I'm a little more than a drafter. Like I'm building things in 3D, and then I'm a BIM modeler. Well, what's BIM? Well, I'm a drafter. So
yeah,
it kind of reverts back. But you mentioned all these hierarchies and levels, and since the implementation of a BIM workflow with all the information, and the information had to be managed and processed and down to the shop and down to the field and then installed and then back to the shop and then maintenance and all that stuff, 5D or 7D, whatever that ridiculous is, right? All of that grew from technology. So the amount of open positions currently, I would say, I only know the US market, but the amount of open positions in the US market, everyone is hiring. Everyone I've talked to I was like, you guys hiring? Everyone's hiring. Literally
mm,
everyone. Now, who they are hiring depends on what you can bring to the table. If you're in the trades and you come in and you've been in the trades for 4 years and you want to sit at a desk and draw, hired like that, right? If you're coming out of college and you want to come in as a BIM coordinator, you may have to get your feet wet, like you were talking about architects and interns and working your way up. Um, so there's a lot of different ways to get into the field, but there's no clear direction other than, I guess, Ireland, which has a fantastic BIM program. There's no clear direction here in the States of, I want to go to school for BIM. Well, then you go to architecture and engineering, but I don't want to be an architect. I don't want to be an engineer. I'm just going to go to school for BIM. That's not out there yet. And I'm hoping that, you know, eventually we'll grow into like, oh, there's architect, engineer, and then there's BIM. So
yeah,
you can do these or you can go this third path. And I hope that comes out soon. But
yeah.
um,
It definitely is required. Like you hit the nail on the head. It is a
yeah,
profession. It's a particular profession, and it needs to be um, in better education systems. I know there are colleges here in Toronto and spread around Canada. I'm not sure about the States, but just here in Toronto, there's like George Brown College, which do a postgraduate certificate in BIM as
yeah,
well. So these give people the opportunity to be able to get qualified and have that like kind of qualification that has BIM in it, as opposed to just having your architect qualification then saying you know how to use Revit, you know how to use Navisworks and so
yeah,
on, and you know what a BIM execution plan is. But that kind of brings me to a point about like the different roles and the titles and so on. And for me personally, I think the word BIM manager is kind of important to a degree because just for me, because I studied it and that was the name of the course, right?
it's on your master's
However,
degree, right?
yeah, exactly. So it's important, and it's not necessarily saying that you have to have education behind you if you want to become a BIM manager, because
No,
it's
no,
like every profession in years gone by and decades gone by, everybody can work their way up to a certain level to get qualified in something like for example, like even a kind of a funny example, getting a driver's license back in the day, you could just go in and buy one. But now over time they developed strategies
where
where you,
where was
yeah,
that?
in Ireland you could, yeah. And obviously over time they're just developing like training strategies, and you have to commit time
Hmm.
to it, and you have to do tests and so on. So, and then I think even an architectural technologist back in Ireland, I don't know about North America now, but they could become an architect. And I think it's changed now with how it's changed now about the recognition that they can get. But I think back in the day, I worked with a senior architectural technologist, but he was also able to sign off on drawings because you could go towards that path. So it allowed people to be able to do that at the time, but now it's heavily regulated. And
Yeah,
back to the issue is that's why I think it's important for it's if you're a BIM manager, if you're being hired as a BIM manager, you're a BIM manager. And what you see now is a lot of like digital practice leads and things like that. And
VDC
that's
coordinators and BIM managers,
yeah.
VDC director, BIM director.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's
VDC is kind of understandable as well to a degree when you're in the kind of construction side of it as well. But there's so many, and like
it's
digital practice like can be any sector basically, any industry,
right,
any like
right.
you can be a director of digital technologies in accounting, in in graphic design, in
Yeah,
literally anything, right? So it's a very vague kind of title, and it's kind of a director status where it's created within the in-house environment, right? But if you're talking about an internationally recognized standard approach of building information modeling, and you hire a BIM manager that is managing those BIM process throughout, And don't get me wrong, there can still be a digital director and
Yeah,
digital
I mean,
technologies director because
right. Titles are a dime a dozen over here in the U.S. I mean,
yeah,
what I think is the job description and what you're doing in that job description.
but that's exactly every digital lead or digital technologies director that I've seen
Yeah.
in the roles and responsibilities, it's it's just spelling out exactly what a BIM role is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Yep.
create the BIM execution plan, create the standards, manage BIM kickoff meetings, manage BIM coordination, and just call it a BIM manager then. So, um, you know what I mean? It's just like, but there's a lot of areas where in kind of digital technologies I don't get involved in. So it's completely understandable that they exist, but we need to kind of describe it separately to what BIM is. Okay,
Yeah.
like they could be the lead in trying to understand programming, right? Which is programming is not part of BIM process. It enhances the BIM process, but it's not in the curriculum of what BIM is, right?
You're gonna get
You
all
know what
the
I
hate
mean?
in the comments for that one. I was told once that every BIM manager should know how to code, and
No, I
I
don't
don't
believe
know if
so.
I
No,
believe that. I think
no,
and we'll both get hate for that one, but I don't think
yeah,
so. I think coding is a definite plus. If a BIM manager knows coding and does all that stuff, that's great. But what a BIM manager should delegate that coding to the person who does it correctly and all the time
exactly.
and
So
stuff. And I think,
I've worked with like programmers who just like know Python and know C,
yeah,
uh, and they know it inside out, and the things that they can create is phenomenal. But that's their job. It's like if a BIM manager got involved, heavily involved with coding, they wouldn't have time to manage the BIM process on a project. Okay,
hmm
they're just physically because we've all gone down rabbit holes of trying to make like a script work, and you're just there. Why isn't that working? You're constantly in it, and it's the same rabbit
AutoCAD
hole of
Lisp
trying to.
routines.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's insane. So the point I'm making is like those roles and are all kind of they're required for what a firm needs them to do. It shouldn't be this
hmm
one big umbrella to say if you're a director of digital practice that you have to control like you be up to speed with other software, other technologies, and then you try to work with your BIM team to be able
Yeah,
to implement them. And then your BIM team then if you have an in-house programmer that is able to like a programmer can also program scripts for Excel, for example. Okay, so that can benefit the marketing team, that can benefit the HR team. So they don't necessarily have to be completely involved in the BIM process, and that's why for a BIM manager or a BIM coordinator, they just work with other people, and you hire the right people to be able to make the project like flow to make it work. It's like in
yep.
any industry. It's like a sports analogy. I'm a Man United fan, and recently got taken over by uh, a guy, Sir Jim Radcliffe is his name, and he's a big CEO of a major company. He's a billionaire in the UK, but he's bought a share in Man United, but he's not going to run the club. He's going to hire the right guys to do the right job, like director of football and CEO and so on. So
Right.
that has to be the same thing when it comes to a BIM project. And we already have it there for architecture itself. So we have the project manager, we have the job captain, we have the intermediate role, we have somebody who's good at contract admin, and we have somebody who's good at detailing, right? And
Yep.
that's where the architectural technology role came from. So we already have those different sectors within every other industry, but it's just like we need to get that in BIM as well. And part of like what I'm trying to kind of aim for as well is to try to convince potential clients of that as well. That I hit roadblocks where I try to convince a client, a potential client or a firm to take me on, and you hear the same kind of thing. Oh, we want someone in here full time, and I say, okay, that's fine, but even if you do have someone full time, I can be taken on as a different role to assist in a specific project, to be that extra resource on troubleshooting while your BIM manager is coordinating meetings, or to be able to
Right.
kind of just provide more input in terms of new technologies or new like software,
Right.
like
Yep.
format. So it's trying to trying to make them convince them to kind of see that avenue and to see, okay, that's what BIM is. It's a bigger
it's a
picture, you
it's a
know.
collective amount of people doing the right thing. So yeah,
Exactly.
no,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's awesome. Uh, Kevin, any last words before we head out?
No, I can't think of that off the top of my head.
No inspirational quotes.
Bring BIM, bring BIM back to basics, and
There you go.
okay, no, there's one Funnily enough, you mentioned that. There's one great quote when so I done a master's. My thesis for my master's was it was called Building Information Management, not modeling, right? And it was
Okay.
based on the understanding of BIM in the Irish AEC industry, because it was heavily involved with international national surveys on BIM adoption, basically. And it was like
Okay.
you had 10 questions, and it was a published report every week. And do you know BIM, or do you use BIM? And you'd have yes, yes, yes. I'll tick all the
Yeah,
boxes,
yeah.
and then the report will be created, and it was like 92% of the industry is using BIM, and it's just like no, they aren't, you know. So,
What's your
so it's
quote? What's your quote?
so so we don't all have to know and understand the technology involved with the process, but we all have to understand who to ask to implement it or something like that. I can't remember at the top of my head, but it was
Yeah.
somewhere like that. And it was all about based on communication, basically, you know. So,
That's what it all comes down to in the
yeah,
end. Kevin, I appreciate you coming on today. I'll definitely have to have you on
fantastic.
again. We can definitely talk for another hour or two.
Oh,
Um,
100%. Yeah.
if you guys like what you're listening to, please like, subscribe, and follow on Strive on all socials. And we try to post once a week. So, Kevin, thanks again.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks, Alex.